The grand chamber of the Galactic Council stretched wider than most planetary capitals. Its crystalline dome, reflecting the light of 1,000 worlds that made up the ancient alliance known as the Confederated Systems of Peace and Prosperity. For 10,000 years, this chamber had witnessed the resolution of countless disputes through careful words and measured diplomacy, rather than bloodshed and destruction. Today, the air hummed with tension as representatives from 300 species watched the unfolding crisis between the Vrexian Empire and humanity. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the human delegation's platform, a small figure compared to the towering forms of elder species around her. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple style, and her expression remained calm, despite the gravity of the situation facing her world and her people. Across the circular chamber, War Prime Krelthor of the Vrexian Empire rose to his full height of 3 meters, his scaled body gleaming under the chamber lights like polished obsidian armor. The human territories occupy space that rightfully belongs to the Vrexian sphere of influence, Krelthor announced, his voice carrying the weight of a species that had known only conquest for millennia. Their colony worlds sit upon mineral deposits that our empire requires for continued expansion and prosperity. We have given the humans 48 standard hours to evacuate their settlements and cede control of these territories to Vrexian administration. Failure to comply will result in military action to secure what is ours by right of superior strength. The council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but none moved to intervene directly in what they saw as a territorial dispute between 2 sovereign powers. Chen noted their reactions with careful attention, reading the political currents that flowed through the ancient chamber like invisible threads. Rivers. The Confederated Systems maintained peace through a delicate balance of diplomatic pressure and the implied threat of collective action against aggressors. However, in practice, the Council rarely intervened in disputes between member states unless the conflict threatened to spread beyond the parties directly involved. Humanity had joined the galactic community only 50 years earlier, after achieving faster-than-light travel through their own scientific development rather than through gifted technology from elder species. In those 5 decades, humans had proven themselves to be cautious diplomats who preferred negotiation to confrontation, compromise to conflict. Every dispute humanity had faced since joining the Council had been resolved through peaceful means, through trade agreements and territorial compromises that left all parties moderately satisfied, if not entirely happy. The Thexian trade dispute had been settled with humans accepting lower tariff rates in exchange for expanded market access. The Calvorian border disagreement had ended with humanity ceding a small asteroid cluster in return for mining rights elsewhere. Time and again, humans had chosen the path of least resistance, earning them a reputation as reasonable, but perhaps weak members of the galactic community. Krelthor's mandibles clicked together in what his species considered a, quote, expression of amusement and contempt. The humans have proven themselves to be a species without spine or courage, he continued, his words dripping with disdain that echoed through the chamber. They negotiate when they should demand. They compromise when they should stand firm. They retreat when pressed by any force stronger than themselves. We do not expect resistance to our entirely reasonable demands for territory that they cannot adequately defend or properly utilize. Their so-called colonies are barely developed outposts that waste the resources of valuable worlds. Several council members nodded slightly, their body language suggesting agreement with Krelthor's assessment of human character and capabilities. Ambassador Chen waited patiently for the War Prime to finish his statement, her hands folded calmly before her as she maintained her composed expression. Through her Neuralink, she could feel General Marcus Webb observing from Earth, his presence a steady weight in her consciousness, even across the light years that separated them. "May I respond?" Chen asked the council speaker, her voice quiet but clear in the vast chamber. The speaker, an ancient Yilkar, whose species had founded the council 8,000 years before humanity had developed written language, gestured affirmatively with 3 of his 4 arms. Chen stepped forward to the center of her platform, and the chamber's projection systems focused on her, displaying her image to all present. "Krell speaks of humanity's peaceful nature as though it were a weakness born of fear," she began, her tone conversational rather than confrontational. "He interprets our diplomatic approach as evidence that we lack courage or capability for conflict. The Council's records support this view to some degree, showing that humanity has indeed chosen peaceful resolution in every dispute we have faced since joining your alliance. However, I must respectfully inform this assembly that there exists a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of human behavior and the reasons behind our diplomatic choices. We do not choose peace because we fear war or lack the capacity for violence." Krellthor's laugh rumbled through the chamber like distant thunder across a hostile landscape. "Then why do you always bend rather than break, always compromise rather than confront?" he challenged. "Every species in this council knows that those who truly possess strength do not constantly seek to avoid its use. Warriors understand that sometimes conflict is necessary, that sometimes territories must be defended with blood rather than words. Your species talks endlessly of peace because you have no alternative, because you know that in actual combat, you would be swept aside like dust before a storm." Chen's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes, a hardness that hadn't been visible moments before. "General Webb," she said quietly into her neural link, "please transmit authorization code Prometheus 7 to the Council database. Let them see what they're actually dealing with before this goes any further than words." In orbit around the Council world, human data transmission systems began uploading files to the Central Archive that all Council members could access. "Members of the Council," Chen continued, her voice taking on a different quality now, something that made several of the nearer delegates lean back slightly in their seats. "I have just released humanity's complete historical military records for your review and consideration. Before War Prime Krellthor proceeds with his threat of military action, I believe it would be wise for this assembly to understand exactly what human fear of war actually means. You see, we don't fear war itself," she said, and now her calm expression seemed less like peace and more like the stillness of deep water hiding unknown depths. "We fear what we become during it, what we're capable of when we stop holding ourselves back. We choose peace not from weakness but from memory, not from inability but from understanding. The Vrexian Empire prides itself on 10,000 years of warrior tradition, on a culture built around martial excellence and the glory of combat. Humanity fought more wars in a single century than your empire has fought in its entire existence. Stop, because we lost. We stopped because we won too well, because we became too efficient at killing each other. So before you dismiss our diplomatic nature as cowardice, War Prime, perhaps you should examine exactly what you're threatening to awaken." The chamber fell silent as council members began accessing the newly available human historical records. Krellthor's expression showed confusion mixed with contempt, unable to believe that this small species could possibly pose any legitimate threat to his empire's military might. Ambassador Chen stood calmly at her platform, waiting for the records to load, waiting for the council to understand. The next 48 hours would determine whether the galaxy would finally see what humanity had been carefully keeping locked away behind diplomatic smiles and peaceful negotiations. The Galactic Council's Central Archive hummed with unprecedented activity, as 300 species simultaneously accessed humanity's newly uploaded historical military records. Ambassador Chen had retired to the human delegation quarters, a modest suite by council standards, where she sat with her senior staff, watching the data flow indicators spike across their monitoring screens. "They're really diving deep into the 20th century files," remarked Commander James Torres, Chen's military liaison. "The casualty numbers alone should give them pause." Chen nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful as she observed the access patterns. "Numbers without context are just statistics," she replied. "What they need to understand is the speed, the scale, the industrial efficiency of human warfare when we commit to it fully." Back in the main council chamber, delegates huddled in their respective sections, holographic displays showing them images and data. That challenged everything they thought they knew about the newest member of their alliance. The Yilkar Council speaker reviewed files with growing concern, his four eyes moving rapidly across screens, showing battle after battle, war after war, conflict piled upon conflict in what seemed like an endless cascade of human violence. "This cannot be accurate," muttered Delegate Sirthas of the Morvellian Collective, a species whose own warrior tradition spanned 5,000 years. "The numbers must be exaggerated or mistranslated. They claim 70 million casualties in a single conflict lasting only 6 of their years? That would represent nearly 15% of their total planetary population at that time. No species wages war on that scale. It would be civilizational suicide." Beside him, Delegate Shomar of the Kelvorian Assembly was reviewing tactical data from what humans called the Second World War. "Alone is remarkable," Shomar observed, his voice carrying notes of professional military appreciation, mixed with growing unease. "Look at their production figures for military equipment during this period. They manufactured weapons, vehicles, aircraft, and ships at rates that exceed our current peacetime industrial output. And they did this while simultaneously fighting on multiple continents and across vast ocean expanses." Across the chamber, War Prime Krelthor stood surrounded by his military advisors, all of them studying the human records with expressions that gradually shifted from contemptuous dismissal to something approaching concern. "These battles," one of his generals said quietly, "they fought them with primitive technology by our standards. Chemical propellants, unguided projectiles, crude explosive devices. Yet the tactical sophistication shows clear understanding of combined arms warfare, coordinated logistics across continental distances, and strategic planning on a global scale." Krelthor's mandibles clicked in agitation as he reviewed footage of what humans called the Battle of Stalingrad. 5 months of continuous urban combat," he read aloud. "Nearly 2 million casualties between both sides. They fought building to building, room to room, sometimes floor to floor within the same structure. And this was just one battle among hundreds during this same war." The recordings showed ruins that stretched to the horizon, cities reduced to rubble by artillery bombardment and aerial bombing that turned entire metropolitan areas into landscapes of destruction. What disturbed Krelthor more than the destruction itself was the cold efficiency with which humans had industrialized the process of warfare. They hadn't just fought, they had built entire economies around conflict, transformed their societies into machines designed to produce ever greater quantities of weapons and soldiers. Speaker, called Delegate Morthan of the Arxian Commonwealth. "I am reviewing the humans' development and deployment of atomic weapons. Their records indicate they created devices capable of destroying entire cities with single explosions, then built enough of these weapons to eliminate all life on their homeworld multiple times over." A ripple of shock moved through the assembly as other delegates pulled up the same information. Images appeared on shared displays, showing mushroom clouds rising above devastated cities, documentation of the cold mathematics of mutually assured destruction, and strategic doctrines based on the threat of planetary annihilation. "Why would any species create such weapons?" asked someone from the upper galleries. What possible military utility justifies building arsenals capable of rendering your own world uninhabitable? Deterrence. Chen's voice came through the chamber's communication system as she accepted an invitation to address the council remotely. We built weapons we never intended to use, weapons designed solely to prevent their own use through the guarantee of mutual annihilation. For nearly 50 years, we lived under the shadow of potential self-destruction, where a single miscalculation or moment of poor judgment could have ended human civilization. The council speaker gestured for Chen to continue, his expression grave as he processed the implications. The period we call the Cold War represents perhaps the most dangerous time in human history, Chen explained, her image appearing on displays throughout the chamber. Two major power blocks possessed the capability to destroy each other and themselves, and came close to doing so on multiple occasions. We developed strategies with names like mutually assured destruction and nuclear winter. We calculated acceptable casualty rates in the hundreds of millions. Planned for scenarios that would have made our world uninhabitable for generations. And throughout all of this, we continued developing more efficient ways to wage war, refining our tactical doctrines, studying military history to extract lessons from every conflict we had ever fought. Krelthor found his voice again, though it carried less certainty than before. You speak of ancient history, Ambassador, he said. Your species has not fought a major war in nearly 2 centuries by your own calendar. Surely in that time you have grown soft, lost the edge that your ancestors possessed. Warriors who do not practice their craft become weak, and your people have chosen peace for generations now. Chen's expression on the display screens shifted slightly, and several delegates who had been observing human behavior for decades recognized it as the look humans got when they were about to correct a fundamental misunderstanding. Krelthor, you make the same error that many in this chamber have made, she said. You assume that because we stopped fighting wars, we stopped preparing for them. Let me be very clear. Humanity has not had a major conflict between our own nations for 200 years, precisely because we remember what such conflicts cost us. But we have never stopped studying warfare, never stopped maintaining military capabilities, never stopped training our forces or developing new tactical doctrines. We stopped fighting each other, not because we became peaceful by nature, but because we became terrified of what we were capable of doing. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. Every human child learns about the world wars in school, about the atomic bombs, about the conflicts that nearly destroyed our civilization. We maintain vast archives of military history. We study the tactics and strategies of ancient commanders. We preserve the lessons learned in blood across thousands of years of human conflict. We don't fight wars anymore because we know exactly how to fight them, and we know exactly what that would cost. That knowledge, that historical memory, is not weakness, War Prime. It is perhaps the most dangerous thing about us. Commander Torres appeared beside Chen in the transmission, his uniform bearing the insignias of someone who had spent decades in military service. If I may add something, War Prime, Torres said, his voice carrying the professional courtesy of one soldier addressing another. Human military academies still teach the campaigns of Alexander, of Caesar, of Napoleon, of Rommel and Zhukov. We study the naval tactics of ancient Earth admirals and apply those principles to space combat scenarios. We maintain active duty forces, conduct regular training exercises, and continuously update our combat doctrines based on technological advances and strategic analysis. The difference between humanity and warrior cultures like yours is not that we're weaker or less capable. It's that we choose when to fight, rather than seeking out conflict as a matter of cultural identity. The council chamber remained silent as delegates continued reviewing the historical records. Images of trench warfare, of mechanized armies rolling across continents, of armadas clashing on ancient seas, of cities burning under strategic bombing campaigns filled the holographic displays. The Vrexian advisors huddled closer around Krelthor, their body language showing concern that their war prime was being slow to recognize. "War prime," one of them said quietly, "these humans are not the prey species we assumed. Their history shows a capacity for sustained large-scale warfare that exceeds our own experience. Perhaps we should reconsider our approach to this territorial dispute." But Krelthor's pride, built over a lifetime in a culture that valued martial strength above all else, prevented him from backing down before the assembled council. "History is history, past is past," he declared, his voice rising to carry through the chamber. "I do not doubt that ancient humans were fierce warriors, but that was then, and this is now. Your species has not tested itself in real combat for generations. We will proceed with our claim on the disputed territories. If humanity wishes to defend their colonies, they are welcome to try." Ambassador Chen looked directly at Krelthor through the display connection, and her expression held something that made even the War Prime pause for a moment. "Then I must inform you, War Prime, that humanity formally rejects your territorial demands," she said. "Our colonies will not be evacuated, and any military action against them will be met with appropriate response. Carefully, because you're about to get a practical demonstration." The human colony world designated New Horizon orbited a yellow star similar to Sol, its continents covered with the infrastructure of 30 years of careful development and settlement. 300,000 humans called this world home, living in cities that blended Earth architectural traditions with designs adapted for alien environments. Governor Patricia Reeves stood in the colony's command center, watching orbital scans that showed the approaching Vrexian warfleet with professional calm that belied the pounding of her heart. "They're not waiting for the deadline," reported Colonel Marcus Stone, the colony's military commander. "They're coming in fast and hard, clearly intending to overwhelm our orbital defenses before we can properly organize resistance." Reeves nodded, her fingers moving across command interfaces with practiced efficiency. "They think surprise will break us," she said. "Let them think that for a while." "Colonel, status on our defensive preparations." "All civilian evacuation to designated shelters is 97% complete," Stone replied. "Our orbital platforms are ready to put on the show we discussed, and our actual defensive positions are fully staffed and awaiting engagement authorization. Ground forces have deployed according to Plan Thermopylae, with modifications based on the Vrexian approach vectors. In high orbit, the Vrexian fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel with the confidence of predators who had never known defeat. War Prime Krelthor commanded from his flagship, a massive vessel bristling with weapon systems designed to reduce planetary defenses to molten slag. "Target their orbital defense platforms," he ordered. "Eliminate their capability to resist from space, then proceed with ground operations. I want this world secured within one standard day." The human orbital defense platforms, older models, purchased from a Confederated Systems supplier decades earlier, fired their weapons in patterns that looked desperate and poorly coordinated. Within the first hour of engagement, half of them were destroyed by superior Vrexian firepower, and the others fell back in what appeared to be disorganized retreat. "As expected," Krelthor observed with satisfaction, "their defenses were never designed to face a determined military force. Begin deploying ground assault forces to the primary population centers. We will accept their surrender once they see the futility of resistance." Vrexian dropships descended through New Horizon's atmosphere in formation, their hulls gleaming in the sunlight as they approached the colony's largest city. The landing zones had been carefully selected for tactical advantage, positioned to allow rapid deployment of forces and quick control of critical infrastructure. As the first waves of Vrexian warriors disembarked from their transports, they found minimal resistance. Scattered gunfire came from defensive positions, but nothing that seemed coordinated or effective against their superior numbers and equipment. "The humans flee before us," reported one of Krelthor's ground commanders. "We are securing objectives ahead of schedule. Their colonial militia appears to lack both training and will to fight. We should have full control of the primary cities within hours." But Colonel Stone, watching the Vrexian advance from his secure command bunker, allowed himself a grim smile. "They're following the routes exactly as predicted," he told his staff. "Every move they make is putting them deeper into the channels we've prepared. Governor, I'm ready to trigger Phase 2 on your authorization." Governor Reeves took a deep breath, knowing that what came next would change how the galaxy viewed humanity forever. She said, "Activate Article 7 protocols. Colonel, you have full military authority." Throughout New Horizon, a transformation began that the Vrexians were slow to recognize. The fleeing civilians who had retreated before their advance stopped running and began moving with the coordinated precision of trained military units. Buildings that appeared to be residential structures revealed firing positions designed into their architecture from the colony's initial construction. Supply caches hidden in civilian infrastructure disgorged weapons and equipment that were decidedly not standard colonial defense gear. "Contact!" shouted a Vrexian squad leader, as his unit suddenly found itself under fire from multiple directions. "We're taking casualties. Human forces are more organized than—" His transmission cut off as a precisely coordinated ambush eliminated his entire squad using tactics that spoke of professional military training. Careful preparation. Across the city, similar scenes played out as the Vrexian advance ground to a halt, then began to reverse. "What is happening?" Krelthor demanded from orbit, as reports flooded in of his ground forces becoming pinned down, suffering casualties, losing the initiative they had held moments before. "These are not colonial militia. These are trained soldiers. Where did they come from?" Governor Reeves' face appeared on the Vrexian command channel, transmitted on all frequencies, so every Vrexian warrior could hear her words. "War Prime Krelthor, I am activating Article 7 of the Human Colonial Charter," she announced. "This article grants full military authority to colonial defense forces in the event of unprovoked military aggression against civilian populations. Under this authority, I am calling upon the human defense force units stationed in this sector. Your invasion of a peaceful colony world has triggered a military response. P. You wanted to see if humans could fight, War Prime. Watch carefully." In orbit beyond the Vrexian fleet's sensor range, human warships that had been holding position in stealth mode powered up their systems. These were not the peaceful exploration vessels or modest patrol craft that humanity had displayed in its 5 decades of galactic presence. These were warships designed and built by a species that had spent centuries refining the art of killing, ships whose every line spoke of function over form, efficiency over elegance. Admiral Victoria Cross commanded the response fleet from her flagship, appropriately named the Indomitable. "All ships, this is Cross," she transmitted to her fleet. "You are authorized to engage hostile forces in defense of New Horizon Colony. P. Rules of engagement are weapons-free. Repeat, weapons-free. Show them what human warships can do." Up the Vrexian sensors like new stars appearing in the night sky. Krelthor's tactical officer stared at the display with growing horror, as ship after ship revealed itself, their formations showing a level of coordination and training that matched anything the Vrexian military could field. "War Prime, we count 47 human capital ships and twice that many support vessels," the officer reported. "Their positioning suggests they've been tracking our movements since we entered the system. They allowed us to commit to the ground invasion before revealing their presence. We're out of position to effectively defend against their approach." The human fleet moved with mechanical precision, their weapon systems targeting Vrexian ships with accuracy that spoke of superior sensor technology and combat computers designed by people who had been waging war when the Vrexians were still learning to use stone tools. Missile salvos launched from human destroyers, each weapon following evasive flight paths calculated by artificial intelligence systems that had studied every space combat engagement in recorded galactic history. Energy weapons fired in coordinated patterns that concentrated overwhelming force on specific Vrexian vessels, burning through shields and armor with methodical efficiency. "Return fire," Krelthor ordered, but his fleet was already reeling from the initial strikes. Human ships didn't maneuver like the graceful vessels of elder species. They moved with the aggressive efficiency of predators that had evolved their tactics through endless conflict. They used the gravity well of New Horizon itself as a tactical element, swinging around the planet to gain velocity and position, firing at optimal angles before their targets could properly respond. On the ground, Colonel Stone watched his forces systematically dismantle the Vrexian invasion. Human soldiers moved through the urban terrain with the ease of troops who had trained for exactly this scenario, using every lesson learned from centuries of urban warfare on Earth. They didn't try to meet Vrexian strength with strength. Instead, they used mobility and coordination to strike where the enemy was weak, then fade away before reinforcements could arrive. "Their armor is good, but not perfect," reported one human unit commander. "Sustained fire at the joints and connection points is effective. They're trained for open combat and ceremonial warfare, not the kind of dirty fighting we're giving them. Recommend we continue with guerrilla tactics until their morale breaks." Vrexian warriors, raised in a culture that valued honor and direct confrontation, found themselves facing an enemy that refused to fight by those rules. Humans set traps, conducted ambushes, used false retreats to draw Vrexian forces into kill zones, and employed psychological warfare tactics that wore down enemy morale with ruthless efficiency. "This is not honorable combat," shouted one Vrexian commander in frustration, as his forces were once again forced to retreat from what appeared to be a weakly defended position, only to take fire from a completely different direction. "They fight without honor, without respect for proper military engagement." "They fight to win," Colonel Stone replied over the same channel. "Honor is something you worry about after the shooting stops. Right now, War Prime Krelthor has invaded our world, threatened our civilians, and opened fire without provocation. You should have thought about that before you attacked a peaceful colony." In orbit, the battle was reaching its conclusion, as human ships methodically disabled or destroyed Vrexian vessels that couldn't match their tactical coordination or technological advantages in key areas. Admiral Cross watched the display with professional satisfaction, not joy or triumph, but the quiet competence of someone doing a necessary job efficiently. "War Prime Krelthor," she transmitted on an open channel, "your fleet is combat ineffective, and your ground forces are surrounded. You have one opportunity to surrender and evacuate your remaining forces under terms of honorable withdrawal. Continue fighting, and we will destroy your fleet and capture your army. You have 10 minutes to decide." Krelthor stared at the tactical displays, showing his shattered dreams of easy conquest, his pride warring with the reality that he had catastrophically underestimated his enemy. Around him, his bridge crew waited for orders that would determine whether they lived to see another day. The War Prime's mandibles clicked slowly as he processed his options, all of them bitter, none of them victorious. Throughout the Confederated systems, species that had observed humanity's diplomatic nature for 5 decades watched in stunned silence as the battle for New Horizon unfolded through real-time feeds transmitted by the Galactic Council's observation fleet. What they witnessed challenged every assumption they had made about the small species from the edge of explored space. In the council chambers, delegates who had been studying human historical records suddenly understood that those ancient wars were not aberrations or exaggerations, but rather examples of what humanity was fully capable of when threatened. War Prime Krelthor sat in his command chair aboard his crippled flagship, his pride shattered as thoroughly as his fleet. Around him, the bridge crew worked frantically to maintain basic life support and communications, as human weapons had systematically disabled his ship's combat systems without destroying it outright. They could have killed us, his tactical officer said quietly. Every strike was precisely calculated to disable rather than destroy. They're not fighting to annihilate us, War Prime. They're fighting to win while minimizing casualties on both sides. Krelthor's mandibles clicked in bitter acknowledgement of this truth. The humans had demonstrated superior tactical coordination, better strategic planning, and more advanced combat doctrines than his empire had developed over millennia of warrior tradition. But what disturbed him most was the cold efficiency of their approach, the absolute lack of passion or rage in how they conducted warfare. "Open a channel to the human admiral," he said finally, his voice carrying the weight of defeat. "I will discuss terms of withdrawal." Admiral Cross accepted the communication request, her image appearing on Krelthor's display, with an expression that showed neither triumph nor contempt, only professional courtesy. "War Prime," she acknowledged. "I am prepared to hear your terms for surrender." "Not surrender," Krelthor said, grasping at what remained of his dignity. "Honorable withdrawal of forces from territory that we now recognize as legitimately claimed by humanity." Cross considered this for a moment, then nodded. "We can accept those terms with conditions," she replied. "Your ground forces will disarm and board transport vessels under human supervision. Your fleet will be escorted to the system boundary under our guns. You will provide full documentation of forces deployed and any weapons or equipment that cannot be recovered for proper disposal. And you will sign a formal treaty acknowledging human sovereignty over all colony worlds in this sector." The War Prime wanted to argue, wanted to demand better conditions, but the tactical displays showing his fleet's devastation made clear he had no leverage for negotiation. "Agreed," he said, "but I would know something, Admiral. Your forces fought with tactics I have never encountered. Where did you learn to wage war with such precision and coordination?" "We learned from ourselves," Cross replied. "Every battle humanity has ever fought, every war we've waged, every tactical mistake and strategic triumph has been documented and studied. We maintain military academies where officers study campaigns that occurred thousands of years ago on our homeworld. We learn from our history because we never want to repeat the worst parts of it." She paused, then continued with something that might have been sympathy in her voice. "War Prime, your species has a warrior tradition spanning millennia, and that is worthy of respect. But you fight for glory, for honor, for cultural identity. Humanity fights to end fights, to win decisively, so the conflict doesn't continue. Enjoy war. We're horrifyingly good at it, and that's why we avoid it whenever possible." On the surface of New Horizon, Colonel Stone coordinated the disarmament and processing of Rexian prisoners with the same efficiency his forces had shown in combat. Human soldiers treated their captives with correct military courtesy, providing medical care for the wounded and proper facilities for holding captured warriors until they could be repatriated. "Your forces fought well," a captured Rexian officer told Stone during processing. "But I do not understand your tactics. You struck from hiding, used deception, refused honorable combat. How can warriors respect themselves using such methods?" Stone regarded the Vrexian with patient expression of someone explaining basic concepts to a student. "We're not warriors in the sense you mean," he said. "We're soldiers, and there's a difference. Warriors fight for personal glory and cultural tradition. Soldiers fight to complete objectives and protect their people. Warriors want honorable combat. Soldiers want to go home alive. We didn't use your preferred style of warfare because we're not here to give you a fair fight. We're here to defend our colony. He gestured to the city around them, where human civilians were already emerging from shelters to begin repairs on damaged infrastructure. Every tactic we used, every ambush and deception, was designed to minimize casualties on both sides while achieving our objective. If we'd fought the way you wanted, thousands more would have died, both yours and ours. Maximum bloodshed. The Vrexian had no answer to that question, raised as he had been in a culture that valued glorious battle above practical victory. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session to address the rapidly changing political situation. Species that had dismissed humanity as weak and overly diplomatic now scrambled to reassess their strategic positions regarding human space and human interests. Ambassador Chen stood once again at her platform, but the atmosphere in the chamber had changed dramatically from the previous session. Now delegates watched her with wary respect, speaking in hushed tones about the military capabilities humanity had demonstrated. "Members of the Council," Chen began, "I stand before you in the aftermath of an unprovoked attack on a human colony world. We have successfully defended our territory and forced the withdrawal of Vrexian military forces. And why? Humanity did not seek this conflict. We did not want this demonstration of our military capabilities. We would have preferred to continue our diplomatic approach to resolving territorial disputes. But War Prime Krelthor made assumptions about human nature based on incomplete information. He saw our peaceful choices as weakness rather than wisdom." She looked directly at Krelthor, who stood in the Virexian delegation area under the watchful eyes of Council security forces. "The War Prime assumed that because we chose peace, we were incapable of war. This is a fundamental misunderstanding that I attempted to correct before the shooting started. We don't fear war. We fear what we become during it. We fear the cold calculations of acceptable casualties, the industrial efficiency of mechanized killing, the brutality that humans are capable of when we stop restraining ourselves." On the holographic displays throughout the room, chamber, footage played from the battle for New Horizon. Not propaganda or dramatic imagery, but cold tactical recordings that showed human forces moving with mechanical precision, executing complex maneuvers with practiced ease, fighting with the efficiency of people who had been preparing for war even while desperately hoping to avoid it. "For 200 years, humanity has chosen peace in our internal affairs," Chen continued. "We stopped fighting each other not because we forgot how, but because we remembered too well. Every human child learns about the world wars, about the atomic weapons, about the conflicts that nearly destroyed our civilization. We carry that historical memory like a weight, a constant reminder of what we're capable of when we let violence become our primary solution." She paused, letting her words carry through the silent chamber. "But that historical memory also means we've never stopped studying warfare, never stopped training our military forces, never stopped preparing for the possibility that we might need to defend ourselves. We maintain professional armed forces. We run regular combat exercises. We continuously update our tactical doctrines based on technological advances and strategic analysis. The difference between humanity and traditional warrior cultures is that we don't fight for glory or honor or cultural identity. We fight when we must, and when we fight to win decisively so the conflict ends." General Marcus Webb appeared on the displays beside Chen, his presence adding weight to her words. "The tactics and strategies we employed at New Horizon were not new or innovative," Webb explained. "They were adaptations of methods developed by human military theorists centuries ago, refined through study of countless historical battles. We used combined arms coordination, perfected during Earth's world wars, tactics learned through conflicts in dozens of Earth cities. We applied naval strategy principles from ancient Earth admirals to three-dimensional space combat. We executed ambush and guerrilla warfare techniques developed by resistance movements throughout human history. Every move we made, every tactic we employed, came from our accumulated understanding of warfare built over thousands of years of human conflict. He let that information settle before continuing. What makes this dangerous for potential adversaries is not that we're naturally warlike or unusually violent. What makes this dangerous is that we've documented and analyzed every aspect of warfare from our long history. We know what works, we know what doesn't, and we've built military doctrines that incorporate lessons paid for in blood by our ancestors. When humans go to war, we don't start from cultural tradition or warrior codes. We start from thousands of years of accumulated tactical and strategic knowledge. The council speaker raised two of his four hands in a gesture requesting clarification. Ambassador Chen, General Webb, he said, help this assembly understand something. If humanity possesses such formidable military capabilities and such extensive knowledge of warfare, why have you hidden this from the galactic community? Why present yourselves as peaceful and diplomatic when you are clearly capable of much more? Chen's expression softened slightly, showing something like sadness. Speaker, we didn't hide what we are. We showed you who we're trying to be. Yes, humans are capable of horrific violence and efficient warfare. But we're also capable of choosing peace, of building rather than destroying, of cooperation rather than conquest. For 5 decades, we've chosen to engage with the galactic community through diplomacy and trade, because that's the version of humanity we want to be. We're not pretending to be peaceful, we're actively choosing peace, even though we remember exactly what the alternative costs. That choice, that daily decision to restrain our capacity for violence, is what defines modern humanity. She gestured to the footage still playing on the displays. What you saw at New Horizon wasn't humanity reverting to our savage past. It was humanity defending our people, using tools and knowledge we've maintained specifically for that purpose. We don't want to fight, but we've never forgotten how. We choose peace not from weakness, but from wisdom, not from inability, but from understanding. War Prime Krelthor stepped forward in his delegation area, his posture showing the weight of defeat and new understanding. Ambassador Chen, he said, his voice lacking its previous arrogance, I acknowledge that I gravely miscalculated. I saw your species' diplomatic nature and assumed it indicated weakness rather than restraint. I thought that warriors who do not constantly prove themselves in combat must have grown soft. I was wrong, and my warriors paid the price for my error in judgment. He paused, then asked the question that many delegates wanted answered. But I must know, what would have happened if we had not surrendered when we did? Would you have destroyed my fleet entirely? Killed my warriors without mercy? Admiral Cross, still connected to the transmission, responded before Chen could answer. We would have disabled every ship in your fleet, captured every warrior who survived, and held them all as prisoners of war, under the terms of the Geneva Conventions. Those are rules of warfare developed on Earth centuries ago to ensure humane treatment of combatants, even in the midst of conflict. We would have won decisively, but we would have done everything possible to minimize unnecessary casualties. That's what makes us different from warrior cultures, War Prime. We don't fight to kill, we fight to win. And we know from painful experience that winning means ending the conflict in a way that prevents it from starting again. The council chamber remained silent, as species throughout the galaxy processed this new understanding of humanity. The small, diplomatic, peaceful humans were not weak or naive. They were veterans of conflicts more brutal than most species had experienced, choosing restraint out of wisdom rather than inability. And that realization changed everything. 7 standard days after the Battle of New Horizon, the Galactic Council reconvened in full formal session to address the aftermath of the conflict and the fundamental shift in how the galaxy views humanity. The Grand Chamber filled with representatives from 300 species, all of them viewing the proceedings with unprecedented attention and interest. Ambassador Sarah Chen, stood at the human delegation platform, no longer the underestimated diplomat from a minor species, but now a figure that commanded genuine respect throughout the assembled delegates. Beside her, General Marcus Webb attended in full military dress uniform, representing the human armed forces that had demonstrated capabilities the galaxy had never suspected. War Prime Krelthor of the Vrexian Empire stood at his own platform, stripped of the arrogant confidence that had characterized his previous appearances. He was there to formally sign the peace treaty that acknowledged human sovereignty over disputed territories and established reparations for the unprovoked attack on New Horizon Colony. The council speaker called the session to order, his forearms moving in traditional gestures that conveyed the gravity of the moment. This assembly convenes to address the recent military conflict between humanity and the Vrexian Empire, he began. We are here to formalize the terms of peace and to discuss the broader implications of what has transpired. The treaty signing proceeded with appropriate ceremony, both Chen and Krelthor affixing their signatures to documents that would be preserved in the council archives for future generations to study. When the formal procedures concluded, the speaker invited Chen to address the full assembly. Members of the council, Chen began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. The events of the past week have revealed truths about humanity that we had not previously shared with Galactic community. I want to take this opportunity to explain why we chose to present ourselves as we did, and what the future relationship between humanity and the Confederated Systems might look like. She activated holographic displays that showed images of Earth, a blue and green world that appeared peaceful and beautiful from orbital distance. This is our homeworld, the planet where humanity evolved and developed our civilization over hundreds of thousands of years. It's a world of remarkable beauty and diversity, but also a world that has witnessed almost constant warfare throughout recorded human history. The displays shifted to show timeline markers stretching back across millennia, each one representing major conflicts from human history. We didn't develop space travel until we had already fought thousands of wars among ourselves. We reached our own moon while we still had weapons capable of destroying our entire world. Learned to travel between stars only after we had learned to control our own destructive impulses. Chen's expression showed something like pain as she continued. There's a saying on Earth that those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. Humanity takes this principle very seriously because we cannot afford to forget what we're capable of. Every human child learns about the world wars, about the atomic bombs, about the conflicts that killed millions and nearly ended our civilization. We maintain museums and memorials dedicated to preserving the memory of warfare and its costs. We study military history not to glorify combat, but to understand its patterns and consequences. She gestured to General Webb, who stepped forward to contribute his perspective. The Human Defense Force maintains detailed records of every significant military engagement in our species' history, Webb explained. We study ancient battles fought with swords and shields, naval engagements from the Age of Sail, mechanized warfare from the Industrial Era, and modern combined arms operations. We maintain this institutional knowledge specifically so that if we must fight, we fight with maximum efficiency to end conflicts as quickly as possible. We don't train warriors seeking glory or honor. We train soldiers who understand that war is a terrible necessity that should be avoided whenever possible and ended decisively when it cannot be avoided. The council speaker leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. General Webb, help us understand something, he said. The Vrexian Empire has maintained warrior traditions for thousands of years, yet your forces defeated them decisively despite humanity's relatively recent emergence onto the galactic stage. How is this possible? Webb considered the question carefully before responding. Speaker, the Vrexians are formidable warriors with a proud military tradition. But their approach to warfare is fundamentally different from ours. They fight for cultural reasons, for honor and glory, and the maintenance of warrior traditions. This means their tactics and strategies have remained relatively stable over millennia, because changing them would mean abandoning cultural identity. Humanity, on the other hand, has never had a unified warrior culture. We've had dozens of civilizations developing military doctrines independently, learning from each other's successes and failures, constantly adapting and innovating. We don't fight for glory, we fight to win, and that means we're always looking for more efficient methods. He pulled up tactical displays showing the Battle of New Horizon from multiple perspectives. At New Horizon, we employed tactics developed by ancient Earth civilizations, adapted from modern technology and three-dimensional space combat. We used urban warfare, techniques learned through painful experience in Earth cities. We applied principles of maneuver warfare that have proven effective across thousands of years of military history. The Vrexians fought bravely and skillfully according to their traditions. But traditions can become predictable, and predictability is dangerous in warfare. Delegate Zerthos of the Morvellian Collective, whose own species had significant military capabilities, raised a query. Ambassador Chen, General Webb, your explanation suggests that humanity's strength comes from accumulated knowledge rather than inherent superiority. Does this mean that other species could achieve similar capabilities by adopting human methods? Chen nodded thoughtfully at the question. Absolutely, she replied. There's nothing unique about human biology that makes us better warriors than other species. What makes us effective is our cultural approach to warfare, to learn from history, and our refusal to let tradition override tactical necessity. Any species could adopt similar doctrines if they were willing to study military history systematically and adapt their approaches based on empirical evidence rather than cultural tradition. She paused, then added something that made several delegates lean forward with interest. In fact, we would be willing to share some of our military educational resources with the Council. Not weapons technology or classified tactical information, but the theoretical frameworks and historical analysis that inform our strategic thinking. We believe the galaxy would be more stable if all species understood warfare well enough to avoid it. This offer sparked immediate debate among the delegates, with some species enthusiastic about the opportunity to learn from human military theory, while others expressed concern about proliferating such knowledge. The council speaker raised his hands for silence, then addressed Chen directly. Ambassador, this is a generous offer that requires careful consideration by the full council, but it raises a fundamental question about humanity's role in the confederated systems going forward. Your species has demonstrated military capabilities that exceed those of many elder races. How should the Council adjust its structure and policies to reflect this new reality? Chen had been expecting this question and had prepared her response carefully. Speaker, members of the Council, humanity does not seek dominance or special privileges within the confederated systems. We join this alliance because we believe in the principles of peaceful cooperation and mutual prosperity. The fact that we possess significant military capabilities doesn't change our fundamental commitment to those principles. However, we do believe the Council should reconsider some assumptions about how peace is maintained. She activated displays showing the Council's historical approach to conflict resolution. For 10,000 years, the Confederated Systems has maintained peace, primarily through diplomacy and the implied threat of collective action. This has worked remarkably well, creating the longest period of general peace in galactic history. But as the situation with the Vrexian Empire demonstrated, some potential aggressors may view diplomatic species as weak targets. They may mistake restraint for inability, patience for timidity. We propose that the Council adopt a more explicit doctrine regarding the use of force to maintain peace, not abandoning diplomacy as the primary tool, but making clear that peaceful species are not defenseless species. General Webb stepped forward again to elaborate on this concept. There's an ancient Latin phrase from Earth, si vis pacem, para bellum. It means if you want peace, prepare for war. Prepare for war. This isn't a call for militarism or aggression. It's a recognition that peace is more stable when potential aggressors understand there will be real consequences for violation. Humanity would be willing to contribute to a Council security force, not as conquerors or enforcers, but as guarantors of the peace that benefits all member species. We could provide training and doctrine development to help other species defend themselves more effectively. We could serve as a visible reminder that the Council's commitment to peace is backed by genuine capability to defend it. War Prime Krelthor, who had been listening silently throughout this exchange, requested permission to speak. The Council speaker granted it, and the Vrexian leader stepped forward with posture that showed humility rather than his previous arrogance. Members of the Council, I stand before you as someone who learned a painful lesson about the danger of assumptions, Krelthor said. I saw humanity's diplomatic nature and assumed weakness. I thought that species which choose peace must lack capacity for war. I was catastrophically wrong, and the warriors under my command paid for that error. He looked directly at Chen and Webb. But I also learned something else from this experience. The humans defeated us decisively, captured thousands of my warriors, disabled my fleet. They could have destroyed us, killed everyone, made an example that would terrify potential adversaries. Instead, they treated our prisoners with respect, provided medical care for the wounded, and allowed honorable withdrawal once we acknowledged defeat. They won the battle, but chose not to humiliate us in victory. This is not the behavior of a cruel species, or one that enjoys warfare. This is the behavior of people who understand that how wars end determines whether peace will last. Words carried weight with the assembled delegates, many of whom had been concerned about what humanity's military capabilities might mean for galactic stability. Shen acknowledged Krelthor's statement with a slight nod of respect. War Prime, your words demonstrate wisdom gained through difficult experience, she said. We defeated your forces not because we hate the Vrexian people, but because we had to defend our colonists. Now that the fighting is over, we have no interest in continuing hostility or seeking revenge. We would welcome the opportunity to establish peaceful relations with your empire based on mutual respect rather than assumed superiority. The Council speaker observed the exchange with approval, seeing an opportunity to transform a crisis into a foundation for more stable peace. This assembly has witnessed something unprecedented, he said. We have seen a military conflict resolved decisively, followed by immediate efforts toward genuine reconciliation.